He was only in my room.
So I've told this story on Reddit before. I love this sub, and for some reason it never really occurred to me to submit it here. So here goes. All true, and definitely the weirdest and creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. When I was a junior in high school, I got my license. Getting my license meant that I would be the first person home for a good few hours. After the initial excitement of having the house to myself wore off, I got into a routine. I would come home, greet our border collie, Moss, make a snack, watch some TV, and then eventually head up to my room. To truly appreciate this story, it's important to know the layout of my parents' house, which is where this all happened. My parents' house was an old Cape Cod-style home. By their estimate, it was built sometime in the late 18th century. The way it's set up, you go in through a back door, and right at that door is a set of stairs. Up those stairs are 2 bedrooms, one to your left and one to your right. My bedroom at the time was the one to the right. There is another set of stairs all the way on the other side of the house at the actual front door that leads to another couple of bedrooms. My parents' master bedroom is on the main floor. My family only ever used the back door to get into the house. We never used the front door or the actual back door, which led to a deck. I'd guess that on the day this happened, the majority of those doors were unlocked since they live in a small town, Maine. Anyway, on this particular day, I came home and went through my routine of greeting the dog and making a snack. I watched TV for probably about a half hour to an hour, and then decided to go upstairs and do whatever teenaged me wanted to do. At this point, I had been home for probably a good hour or so. Like usual, I climbed the stairs with Moss trailing behind me. The stairs creaked while I did it, as they do. Nothing seemed out of place or unusual. However, when I opened my door, everything in my room had been destroyed. My bed, 4-post frame and all, which was normally against the wall facing the stairs, was in the middle of the room. All of my clothes were out of the dressers, which were each feet away from the wall where they were supposed to be. My underwear drawers were completely out of the dresser. Some of my underwear was laid out on the bed, the only things neatly placed in the room that had been scattered. My clothes were everywhere. My furniture was everywhere. Not a single other thing in the house had been touched, and nothing in it was missing. It was only my room. Obviously, I immediately booked it. I took the dog, got in the car, and called my mom, and sat on the side street until someone was there. The police came, and there was nothing they could do. There was nothing they could find that would link someone to it. So for the next few months, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere by myself or do anything alone. However, one thing that's always bothered me, I know I unlocked that back door that day, like I always did. Since it was our main entrance to the house, it was always locked. So whoever went into my room came in through another door, went through the entire downstairs to my staircase, found my room, and went through my things. They knew where they were going. So whoever went through my room when I was 16, let's never meet.
Modeling for a creep.
So this happened when I lived in Japan. I was 16, and anyone who is not familiar with the Japanese culture should know that most of the older Japanese men love younger girls. I had just finished a shoot and was walking out the main entrance of this well-known agency, and there was this guy who looked about mid to late 30s standing out front, just waiting. I walked past him in the direction of the train station to go home, and I hear him talking to me in half English, half Japanese. I turn to see what may be wrong, and he asks if I can take your picture, and I told him no, I was going home for the day. He then starts acting really creepy and being very sporadic in his movements, asking over and over to take my picture. He then grabs me by the arm and tries to pull me over to his car. At that point, I have shoved him away very forcefully and started yelling, which was causing people to look over at the commotion. The unwanted attention made him stop. I started walking very fast towards the train station, looking back every once in a while to keep an eye on this creeper. Then I noticed that he is following me. I pick up the pace even more to try to lose him. I get to the train station, buy my ticket at the kiosk, and board my train for home. Scared, out of breath, and relieved that I made it to the train, and looks to have lost the man following me. I let out a sigh of relief, looked over, and there in the next train car was the guy, just staring at me with this creepy look on his face like he was imagining me in pieces. My stomach turned and I felt panic wash over me. I remember going over all the possibilities of how to handle this situation. The best I could muster up was to just stay on the train and hopefully wait him out, as I did not want him to know which stop I was getting off at. I rode the train that day 2 hours before he eventually got off, the whole time just grinning and staring at me.
They just parked there and watched.
This is a story that happened when I was younger and has creeped me out many a night since, because it was so unknown. There was never any resolve, which makes it so creepy. I'm the middle child of 3 girls. My older sister is 3 years older than me. I'll call her Ariel. And my younger sister is 3 years younger than me. I'll call her Belle. We lived in a small town that was mostly a farming community. We lived in an old 2-story house that I'll probably talk about on Reddit No Sleep because that old thing was very haunted. Anyway, when Ariel turned 13, my parents rejoiced in having a free babysitter. They made a couple of quick trips to the closest grocery store to test how she handled being alone, and she passed swimmingly. We were all on our best behavior because we wanted the freedom that comes with staying by yourself. So our ages were 13, 10, and 7. My parents decided to take a longer trip out to get a few supplies for some house renovating we were doing to the old fixer-upper we lived in. My sisters and I decided it was time to finally beat The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. We'd gotten to the final castle and we were determined we would have it beat by the time they got back. We didn't. Our living room was at the front of the house, on the right side when you came in through the front door. It was a strangely designed room, with the wall to the far side being a mirror, and the wall at the front of the house having 5 windows. We didn't have any curtains on the window at the time because my dad was redesigning the room. We were on the floor playing our video game when Belle happened to glance out the window and noticed a car driving very slowly down our street. We knew our neighbors' cars because they never changed. It was a short red car and no one in our neighborhood owned it. It was dark out, but we had a pair of pillar lights at the end of our driveway that illuminated the end of our driveway. The car came to a stop in front of it. I didn't think much of that, but my Ariel did. She didn't let on that she worried, though. Well, the car turned into our driveway very slowly and sat there for a good 5 minutes. I was still not paying attention, but I noticed Ariel was very tense. "Everything okay?" She shook her head and stood up slowly. She motioned for me and Belle to do the same, which we did. I was beginning to worry, but I didn't want to look like a wimp, so I pretended I was annoyed. "We're going to the kitchen, okay? Be quiet." I remember very clearly that her voice was quiet and strangely calm for how tense she was standing. She was staring at the car and stopped abruptly when it began to move once more. It slowly inched towards our house until it was halfway down our long driveway and stopped once more. Ariel stood still and I remember Belle shuffling closer to her. I was confused at who the strange car belonged to. I opened my mouth to ask what was going on when the car's front doors opened and 2 people stepped out. We couldn't make anything out of what they looked like because the light was behind them and they were mostly dark blobs. I remember them looking large, though that might have just been my frightened mind. My sister grabbed Belle's hand and ran out of the room hollering at me to follow. I did, and she led us to the kitchen, which was in the back of the house. You could see the dining room through it and look out at the window without being seen. She knocked the kitchen lights off just to be safe and grabbed the phone while we stood in the kitchen. Belle started to sob in fear and I was told to hold her. I couldn't tear my eyes from our driveway. The figures had stepped away from their car, but they were still just standing there, looking at our house. "Mom?" Ariel's voice was higher than I'd ever heard it as she quickly relayed what was going on to my parents. They kept her on the phone while they drove back to us. Ariel had me grab a steak knife and took a butcher knife for herself while we waited for them to get back. And all the while, the 2 people just stood there, staring at the house. It felt like I was in some kind of nightmare, just sitting there wondering who they were and what they wanted. Then, for seemingly no reason at all, they got back into their car and backed out of the driveway. They pulled back on the road and raced off right as my parents pulled on the street. They stopped long enough for my mom to get out of the car before my dad raced off after the other car. He never caught it. So, creepy people who stood in my driveway for 20 plus minutes? Let's not meet.